Today's episode is diving into the soul. The name of the podcast is Recover Your Soul. What is the soul? And what are we recovering? We're recovering our higher self. And I'm going to talk about some of the concepts that are what we are learning now in these times that are becoming more open to what is the soul? Have we been here forever? Are we reincarnating? Do we have essences of ourselves that remain? What are we learning from each other? Are we really souls having a human experience? That's what we're going to talk about. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Recover Your Soul podcast, a spiritual path to a happy and healthy life. My name is Reverend Rachel Harrison. I started Recover Your Soul after having profound changes in my life from my recovery of alcoholism, codependency, and control addiction. I was guided to share the tools and principles of spirituality and soul recovery to help others transform their lives as mine was transformed. For us to overcome external circumstances, we need to turn the attention to ourselves, focusing on our inner change and healing. Positive results in our lives will follow. Welcome to the Recover Your Soul podcast and community. I'm Rev Rachel. Thank you for spending your time with me. Thank you for choosing in on your own soul recovery journey. Today, I want to talk about souls. We talk about spirituality here. Recover Your Soul is a spiritual path to a happy and healthy life. And as I say so often, I am not here to tell you exactly what that path looks like. I'm not here to tell you there is only one way to follow a path. I always hope that you take what you need and leave the rest. And if there's ever things that don't resonate with you, totally fine. Totally fine. As a matter of fact, good for you. You should be able to have discernment and to have a level of skepticism, even to allow yourself to be curious about what you believe, that nobody is going to give you what you believe. And yet at the same time, I'm talking about concepts that might be new to some of the people here in this community. And for others, they've been thinking this way the whole time. And I don't really have anything that I was looking in my archives that really talked about what is the soul? What is this soul and soul recovery? And I know that in the episodes, I offer a lot of different concepts, a lot of different ways to view it and see it. But I thought, let's just talk about it and see what comes out of this conversation. As you know, I am getting more and more comfortable in this ability to open my heart and connect with this part of myself that is my higher self and is connected to something even greater still, as I often say. And we all have it. And the more that we open to that intuition, on the bonus podcast on Friday, as a matter of fact, I just did an episode on Patreon and for Apple Podcast subscribers that was about how do you lean into your intuition? How do you use that to help awaken your spiritual life? And I talked about the use of oracle cards and how that is a way that you can talk to a higher aspect of yourself and begin to get more information about your growth. And then that made me think, we should just talk about souls. We should just have this conversation. Recover Your Soul is the name of this podcast and community. It is soul recovery. And what's interesting is that after I had this voice that said to me, and if you haven't heard the story, here it is again, that I knew that I wanted to do a website. I knew I wanted to do potentially a blog. I knew that I was thinking of a podcast, but it was all formulating in those first couple years of recovery. I was so in 12-step. I was so in my Al-Anon meetings. I was so in a life that was incredibly complicated and painful and difficult at that time. And I knew that I needed to do something. Something was calling me. My higher self, I didn't know at the time really how deeply that was calling me. And I was brainstorming with Bodhi on a road trip to California for our annual beach camping trip, which is coming up again. I'm really excited. And he was saying, well, what does it mean to you? And what are you doing? He had just finished school for marketing. So he was talking about all these concepts. And I heard a whisper that said, recover your soul. And I knew that was it. And the more that time has gone on, it's been, Rachel, don't forget to recover your soul. I wish that I could recover your soul sometimes, But that's not what we're here for. We're not about doing it for the other. We're here about turning the attention to ourself. And then it became clear that it was soul recovery, doing this work that is soul recovery. And then I came across a book by Esther Nicholson, who I'm going to have on the podcast, who wrote a book called Soul Recovery, The 12 Keys to Freedom, I believe it is. If I have that wrong, I apologize. And it is using the 12 steps in a more spiritual aligned format for her life and her recovery from addiction and her stepping into a spiritual path. And as far as I know, really, Esther and I are the only two people using the term soul recovery. So what is that? What is the soul? What is this recovery that we're talking about? And when I think about that, I really think about the gift of remembering. Because when you recover something, you're not getting something that wasn't already there. You're recovering something that was already within you. You're just bringing it back to yourself. And what I love about the 9-step soul recovery process that has come over the last years, that, as you know, started out more of a 12-step modification and has transformed into its own process, its own patterning. And it is this spiritually awakening steps and process. It is this ability to be able to see yourself on a spiritual level. So what is the soul? What are we recovering? What are we remembering? What are we coming back to? Being raised Buddhist, I have a very different baseline than a lot of people, right? Most people are raised Christian or nothing, or Jewish or Mormon, or, some level of something, but there wasn't a lot of Eastern philosophy 55 years ago when I was born. And so being born Buddhist was pretty unusual. And I had this concept of reincarnation and of souls. And when I would reflect over to my Christian friends, they talked about souls too. But they talked about souls as being as if it's this, in this body that we have, this personality, this identity that we have, right? That Rachel, born of this soul, as if it is created in that moment. And then you have only this soul, this lifetime, this being. This is it. If you don't get it right this time, there's no hope for you. You go to heaven or you go to hell. And I don't want to actually condemn religion or what people believe. I want to be able to say that you should be able to find what gives you the most connection, where you feel resonates the most for you. So I'm not speaking against anything else. I'm actually just speaking along and for what resonates for me. But I think it's interesting that in Christianity and in religion, and not only Christianity, but many of the religions, there is a mystic perspective that is coming out more and more and more, that's saying, the actual teachings said this, and then it was a bishop or a pope or a leader or somebody who defined some of the rules and some of the ways that the doctrines that we see now. And if you allow yourself to let go of some of those rigid rules and come back to the mysticism, we find at the core of all of it this concept of souls, that we are this essence of something even greater still. And even if you take Genesis and you pare it down into a metaphysical, mystical experience, and you listen to it from that perspective, you start to unwind our attachment to a specific story. And you can see it and hear it in ways that can open it up to a lot of different things. And one of the things that I love is, in the beginning, there was light, which is energy, which is wholeness, which is this being that we are. We are all energy. We are all light. And we are all what I think of as filaments, essences of this creative source, eternal souls. So because I was born with Buddhism, I always believed in reincarnation. And I think I've said in another podcast that, the way my mom kind of described it because it was this big piece of Buddhism to release the self. And so when I thought about releasing the self, I thought about releasing any identification or any attachment that you might have to your identity, to who you are. But I also in that removed the essence of ourself, our true essence. And we all have these innate, beautiful, unique essences of ourself. No one is the same. We might be creative, but it's different. You might be musical, but it's different. You might build, but it's different. You might see beautiful things, but it's different. You might be able to communicate, but it's different. Everybody has their own unique set of gifts and talents. And where did that come from? How is it that we have that? In Buddhism, they talk about karma, that we have this life rebirth, life and death rebirth cycle, and that it is through those cycles that you learn more about yourself, that you have more and more opportunity to step into this divine nature that you are, with the enlightenment being the final step where you understand fully that there is only love, that there is only oneness, and you release all suffering and all attachment. And the more that I step into what it meant for growing up and how I kind of felt like when you did that reincarnation, yes, some element, some essence of yourself stayed, but somehow I kind of felt like it was more like a drop that falls back into the ocean, expressed as a part of a wave or a wave for one moment, but then it goes back into the whole. And again, I just want to say, as always, these are my interpretations and how I see it. So please take what you need and leave the rest. But the more studying that I've done in so many traditions, the yoga traditions, the Hindu traditions, in Christianity, in Course in Miracles. Right now I'm reading The Way of Mastery, which I love so much. I have listened to and read hundreds and hundreds of spiritual books, shamanism, Buddhism, you name it, and I have read it. And what I find is that underneath there's always this current of the soul. What is this soul? This element of ourselves that is really our connection to our higher self, that is beyond whatever our humanness, our life experience, and all of our beliefs and stories and patterns, like we talk about in soul recovery. What are those old beliefs, patterns, and stories that no longer serve us? An operating system that isn't updated. You can think of it as like clothes that no longer fit you or shoes that no longer fit you. That at one point, that was what made sense. At one point, that was the system that you survived from, or taught you how to be loved, or taught you how the world worked. Well, the world is changing constantly, and you're changing constantly. And we're learning how to separate ourselves from this experience that we're having. Eckhart Tolle came out with The Power of Now 20 or 30 years ago. And it was this profound book around the concept that there is only this moment, that everything else is our attachment to the past or our fear of the future. And the way that he described be here now was the same as Ram Dass, who came back after using hallucinogenics and being a Harvard professor and getting fired from Harvard. And he went off to India to discover spirituality, to say, I've seen these things, I've felt these things, I want to know more, I want to learn more about it. I want to open up more. And it was at that time when people were using psychedelics and starting to move out of the rigid constructs and constraints of what the United States was, and all this, be perfect in the 60s and the 50s and the 60s, where everybody was supposed to look a certain way and feel a certain way. And if you looked good on the outside, everything was fine on the inside. And there was this whole ripple of explosion of, God, there's got to be more. And through psychedelics, people were able to access different parts of themselves and see different things. And that was really the beginning of a larger awakening. And right now they're saying that right now, in these couple years especially, there is a massive shift happening where we are switching from a collective that was around fear and control and rules and not enoughness. And if you don't do the right thing, you're going to be damned. That you're born a sinner, which was always blew my mind in terms of Christianity, not at all what I was raised with, rather than being born in your wholeness. And we're here recognizing that we get to have our own relationship with spirit, and that maybe, just maybe, we're opening our eyes to this concept of souls, not as a single soul with one lifetime, but maybe as souls who have come time and time and time again. If you go into the quantum physics and all the wild dimensions and all the stuff that I'm now studying that's pretty far out there, it says, don't get too caught up if you have any past life regressions. Don't get too attached to it, because it's so much more complicated than all of that. And at the same time, every single person, every single lifetime, every single existence is so valuable and so important on more ways than we've ever given ourselves a chance to understand. So when we're recovering our souls, we're actually remembering that we are separate from our thoughts. We are more than controlling the world around us. There is more happening than just what feels like is on this physical plane. And the Course in Miracles talks about it as the illusion. Not that you aren't having this experience, but the illusion part is that how we see it, how we interact with it, how we choose to witness it and be in it is purely of our own mind. And this feels so true for me because only 7 years ago, I was an entirely different person. I was miserable. I wanted to die. I was in a marriage that's the same exact marriage as I am today. Yes, there are a lot of changes in our marriage, but he's still the same person. And my kids' lives were falling apart. I mean, horribly falling apart. And I didn't see a way out. And the fact that I got sober and I quit drinking and I decided to save myself and I decided to finally step on a spiritual path that I had been kind of doddering around on for a while and putting all the stuff up in my head, but I wasn't pulling into my heart. That's when things started to shift and change for me. And that witnessing that we have of ourselves to see our experience in our life in such a profound way. Every interaction, every thought, every experience that you have has value, is so important. And you are co-creating what that experience is. Are you ready to step into your soul recovery? Visit the website recoveryoursoul.net to learn more about the 9-step soul recovery process. I hope that you'll join us the first Monday of every month for the free soul recovery support group on Zoom, where we learn more about soul recovery and connect with each other. If you'd like to work directly with me to move through the 9-step soul recovery process, I'm here for you, but you can also choose to work the steps on your own with individual modules intended to support you to work at your own pace and on your own time. And if you want even more soul recovery, join us for the Recover Your Soul bonus podcast for Patreon members and Apple Podcast subscribers, where I interview amazing people sharing soul recovery tips for us and also do spiritual book studies. You can also find daily inspiration on Facebook and Instagram and join our private Facebook community. Visit the website for more information, links, and registration for everything. Back to the episode. Just taking a quick break from the episode to remind you about the once-a-month soul recovery support group on Zoom, which is such an amazing opportunity to step more deeply into your soul recovery and connect with others on the journey. Normally, we meet on the first Monday of every month, but in September, it will be the 8th of September, the second Monday of the month due to Labor Day. Also a reminder that there is still a chance for you to join me in Asheville, North Carolina in person on the 13th and 14th September for an amazing, powerful, transformational in-person retreat. Visit the website recoveryoursoul.net to register for everything. Back to the episode. Somewhere along the line in the first 2 years of my sobriety, I started to change. I started to shift. And one of those big changes was when I finally read and did a full year of the Course in Miracles with a group. And in the beginning, it was really like a brain blow. My brain was just like shaking around in there, and it was really pushing up against all those old constructs and all those old fears. And slowly, 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 my mind started to open. And that's what I hope I'm giving you too when you listen to this podcast, that you're starting to open to these new concepts. You are recovering your soul. So as I step into this spiritual journey, what I think is very interesting is there's a lot of peace that comes when you think to yourself, what if this is just one of many? What if this isn't the all or nothing? What if there is the conversations and the way that's being talked about so openly, so hugely now? I mean, if you watch the YouTube channels and the videos that I watch, 200, 300, 500,000 people are watching videos on consciousness and souls and reincarnation and soul contracts. And those are just for single videos. And if you multiply that and realize that there are so many of us who are starting to sort of awaken, as they call it, and breaking out of this mold that says people were telling me what it was, and I was in that world, but I'm opening my eyes a little bit, and I'm potentially, just maybe, having a little bit of willingness to see beyond what felt like the rules. So if we're seeing beyond the rules, and there is this concept that we have these souls, and one of the ways that my brain just completely blew open with this is listening to Dolores Cannon and Michael Newton, who were hypnotherapists, and they have books around the hypnotherapy that they do for people, and people still do these hypnotherapies. I actually just did a interview with a woman, Dr. Holly, who also does these hypnotherapies, and that will be on the bonus podcast in the next couple of weeks. And what it does is it takes you into this deep state of trance. And while you're in that, you can speak. And I had a little bit of an example of this because I went and did a hypnotherapy session with somebody locally, and he didn't quite go as far into the woo as I was hoping, but I got down there where it was interesting. I'm speaking, and it was definitely felt like there was something more, there was more access to speak. So Dolores Cannon and Michael Newton both were these hypnotherapists, and they each ended up having different slants of what they were asking people and the information that they received. Michael Newton, who is the one who I really, really, really fell head over heels of interest in what was going on for him. He'd been a traditional scientist, and he was doing hypnotherapy to help people with pain. But what he would find is that people would go back to previous lifetimes where they had had something tragic happen to them, and the pain they were experiencing in this lifetime was a direct correlation with something that had happened to them in a previous lifetime. And then in those deep trances, people started talking about what it was like when they died and what happened to their soul and what happened when they, met the people on the other side. What did that look like? And then they started talking about soul clusters and school on the other side and what they learn and the councils that they talk to. Again, really far out there if this is stuff you've never heard before. But he had hundreds of people who reported the same things who were not. They started doing this work long before the internet, long before people could have been like, oh, I'm going to do a little research and then I'm going to tell him what I want him to hear. No, these were independent people. And just like Dolores Cannon, who had a very similar experience, she was already kind of out there in the woo, but she was doing past life regressions, and people started talking about coming from different planets, from different places, not just from Earth. But this concept around what are souls, That what if there is this essence of us? What if there's this essence of self? And this is what I got from Michael Newton, that they would describe themselves as souls. And there's some essence of our soul that is always in the creation, that is always one with the universe, with source, with whatever you call it, something greater still. And a part of that is here having this experience as a human being. So when these people would go and have these incredible hypnotherapy sessions, they're able to access parts of themselves and relationships, not only the ones that are actively happening here from a soul level, but from people who have passed. And they began to talk about how they were making arrangements, contracts with each other in saying, I'm going to show you how, compassion, but to do that, that means that I'm going to have to play this part that's pretty hard. And this is the part that I think is so, sometimes it's really hard to wrap your head around or to understand or to believe. And it's okay if it doesn't sound like what works for you right now. Because one of the things that I think about is when I was in the real depths of despair in my marriage, and I had been so in love with Rich when I first met him and when we first got married. And then when he went up to build the cabin and I had a toddler and was pregnant and had a new baby, and he was gone for almost 3 years, coming home only on the weekends, and became a pretty intense alcoholic at that time, I was pretty devastated. It was every dream that I had for our life came crashing down, and he came back a different person, and I became a different person. And there was a lot of pain and heartache. And there were many times, both in writing in my journals and straight to his face in therapy, that I would say, I don't know how on earth this was supposed to be what I was supposed to experience. What is this? And our minister, therapist, or counselor who used to do some work with us, who could see above where we were at that moment, right? Because he has reached some level of awareness beyond where we were, would say, there's always a reason. You're learning from each other. Don't forget, this is about your learning. And in those moments, I would just think, that is crap, because I was in so much pain. But now that I have fallen down into this spiritual world, or risen up into the spiritual world, actually, as it is, and begun to separate myself, my soul self, recovering my soul, coming more into my wholeness self, I can watch my life with a level of witness. And this is a lot about what Eckhart Tolle brought to the table, was you can witness your being. Instead of being in it so intensely, you can watch it on some level. And then who is the watcher? When we're having these conversations with ourselves in our head, and we all have them, right? There's all these players. There's the critic, the critic and the judge, and then there's the cheerleader, and then there's the higher self, and then there's the one that's trying to please everybody, and then there's all these versions of ourself. And when we can begin to just be curious about who these players are, what are they trying to do? How are they trying to protect us? Ultimately, what are we learning here? How can we stop trying to control everybody else, turn the attention to ourselves, begin to be curious about what's going on with us? Inside somewhere is our spirit and our soul, who is pure and clean and bright. It is the essence of the light of who we are, who is here having this experience, and it needs for it to be all of it, to learn and to grow. So as I was saying earlier, I think that now that I've moved into this place where I'm willing to really go there, and there are days where it's hard, it's hard to handle the complexity and the reality of everything that's happening in life. And, I hear from you all, and I work with people, and that I don't watch the news, but you can't help but have a reflection of what's happening. It feels it feels sometimes like we're putting our heads in the sand to be in a place where like, well, yes, and on this other level, this is part of our soul's experiences as a collective and as individuals, and not feel like we're not doing enough. But there is so much peace that I feel in being able to rise above it enough to have faith and trust that there's something more that I can't possibly understand, both for my soul's journey and also as the collective. And the reminder that as we step into recovering our souls, more and more leaving behind the sticky, messy, controlling parts of ourselves that do not serve us, and stand in the fullness, recovering our souls, doing this soul recovery work to understand and connect with this grander, more beautiful, more whole, more awakened aspect of ourself. Everything around us, it doesn't change, it just shifts. And this opportunity that we have to awaken as a collective. Each of you has had experiences in your family. If you're listening to the podcast this long, this kind of wild episode this long, you've been with me for a minute. And you have had moments where you've had shifts. And you can feel that knowing that it is a higher self that is slowly coming awake. It is slowly coming on board. What if that is an essence of you that has been here for eons and is continually waking up? What they talk about in this concept of reincarnation from the soul level is the soul has this essence and is continually learning and has the karma, and karma in Buddhism is, things that you need to learn, things that maybe happened in a last lifetime that you need to work out and have more information about, not as a punishment. They talk a lot about how on the other side, there isn't punishment. You can basically do no wrong because ultimately hell is on earth. You get to experience heaven or hell on earth. Jesus said all the time, heaven on earth, heaven on earth, heaven on earth. You're bringing that into yourself because as a soul, there's only this awareness that says, okay, so that happened. So what are you going to learn about it? But as soon as we come into our body, we have amnesia. But we're having amnesia less and less and less and less. And especially now, since the 1940s, where there's been this more energy to remember, to awaken, to remember, to be able to talk about it. So when I think about this from a soul perspective in my life, it gives me so much peace and solace and comfort to think that as a family, we are sharing information with each other about how to love each other, how to allow each person to have their own soul's journey, their own soul's experience. It's given me great ability to let go of my kids because if I think that this one lifetime is it and they've got to get it right, I'm going to be in their business. But if I recognize that as a soul, they have to have their full level of experience, and my witnessing and loving them and being present for their growth is the greatest gift that I can give, but I can actually be detrimental to their soul's experience if I block them from having whatever the contrast and difficult situations that they're supposed to have. And again, all this stuff it's pretty far out there if you are new to this. And really, I've been doing soul recovery in terms of the process of letting go of beliefs and patterns and stories and forgiveness and stepping in with your higher power and stepping into your higher self and shining your light. I've been doing that pretty heavily for 7 years, but it's really only been the last 3 years that I've moved into this other awareness, and I'm still opening to it. I'm still curious about it. But there's so much amazing and incredible evidence and information that's coming from science and from the quantum and from AI, which is giving information that is allowing people to pull from so many different sources where maybe we hadn't been talking out loud like this to each other. But now that it can pull from the different sources, there's more of almost like a mainstream around all of it. And then, you know what I think about? I'm going to use this as a close. Who knows? Honestly, who knows? I mean, this is the piece, is that people go and do those hypnosis and all have the same reflection. People that have had near-death experiences have similar reflections. There are people who say that they have seen, and it reflects what other people say that they've seen, but we don't actually know. So if we're not going to know and you're going to have faith and a belief in something, are you going to choose fear, or are you going to potentially open to light and love? And for me to think that recovering my soul means that I am recovering my higher self and living from that higher self, which is going to come around again and again and again and continue to improve and to learn and to grow, and that this is my opportunity to be in my life to the fullest, I'm going to choose that. And maybe I'm totally off base, but you know what? I've said this before. I'm way happier over here than I was over there. I feel an intense level of peace in my heart. I'm able to detach with love. I'm able to love in a way that I never could before and receive love in a way that I never could before. I'm able to see the people in my life, the difficult ones, the ones that I love, the politics from this other angle, and to have acceptance and even allowing that gives me great peace. Because I'm only here now in this body, in this incredible moment. And so I'm going to be present in this moment. I'm going to let myself continue to learn and believe and go off into all these wild things and continue to recover my soul and share that with you, because love is always the answer. Love always is the answer. And when we shine our light and we begin to open up to what has been around us our whole lives. I mean, all of the paintings that you see on the walls of churches have angels and light and connection and whispers from the other side. What if we open up to that mystical end and begin to see ourselves and those around us simply as souls, learning, growing, having this human experience? And as always, take what you like and leave the rest. If you're interested in any of these things, I do have a page on the website that I believe is in the About Recover Your Soul, What is Soul Recovery? And it has a reading list. And I have them in sections now. It's like, if you want to learn more about codependence and people pleasing, here's the books that I love. And if you want to go into the deep spirituality, I have those listed too. It's fun. Just have an open mind and an open heart. Until next time, namaste. Thank you for listening, and I hope that helps support your soul recovery process. Just a reminder that every Friday is the Recover Your Soul bonus podcast. This podcast is for Patreon members and Apple Podcast subscribers. And not only do you get an incredible interview or book study that comes with being part of that community, but your subscribing helps support this podcast and the Recover Your Soul community. If you want to listen to those bonus episodes but can't subscribe right now, do know that you can be a free Patreon member and have access for limited time to new episodes. Visit the website recoveryoursoul.net or check out the show links below for coupons and information for upcoming events. I thank you for sharing this podcast with your friends and family. I thank you for giving it 5 stars, and the reviews that are left bring tears to my eyes. I am honored to be part of your life. Together, we can do the work that will recover your soul. The Recover Your Soul podcast and its content is for educational purposes only and is not allied or representative of any organizations or religions. It's based on the opinions and experience of Reverend Rachel Harrison. Recover Your Soul claims no responsibility to any persons or entity for any liability, loss, damage, or cause alleged to be caused directly or indirectly as a result of its use. Applications or interpretations of the information represented herein. Take what you need and leave the rest.